Welcome back to the Rich Nonprofit. This is Straight Talk for Mission Driven Women. I have been trying to grow my LinkedIn, and it's been kind of fun because I used to think of LinkedIn as corporate, male, and that you could only post about business. But lately, I'm really connecting with cool people, soul entrepreneurs, heart centered, who believe in their mission. They want to create impact. And so it's been fun for me to meet people on there. And as I was scrolling through LinkedIn the other day, I saw a post about consulting, and they were talking about strategic planning frameworks. And it was more of that corporate feel that I had felt in the past from LinkedIn. And I did not like it because for executive directors and leaders of nonprofits, you're going to spend all this time trying to implement a plan that sounds great in theory, but it's going to fall apart the minute that real life hits. And so today I want to talk about why most strategic planning feels draining instead of energizing, and then how to approach it in a way that gives you clarity instead of just more confusion and frustration. Because if you dread your nonprofit's planning process, that's not a character flaw. It's a design flaw in the planning and the process. And then you're not going to want to implement it, and neither will your team. And I don't want that for you. So, most strategic planning focuses on the wrong timeline, I believe. Planning processes want you to map out 3 to 5 years. But in this climate today, I bet you can barely predict your funding, your programming, and what's going to be needed 6 months from now. I worked with a client recently who told me that her board wanted a 5 year strategic plan, but she just learned that her largest funder was changing their priorities. And her fiscal year was starting in a couple months, and she had some open positions in her staffing. And she's coming to me asking, how am I supposed to plan 5 years out? I don't even know what our budget, our staffing is going to look like in the next quarter. And that is happening to a lot of leaders right now, nonprofit and for profit. Things are changing quickly. And if you have a board that is demanding that they want a 5 year plan, well, that's just not going to work. And this can just break strategic planning wide open because long term planning is assuming stability, but most nonprofits just don't have that stability right now. And it needs to be talked about and not just shoved under the rug and let me just get you this plan so that you'll leave me alone. No, that doesn't help you lead. And as the funding landscape shifts faster than it used to, with government priorities changing, with administrations and foundation strategies evolving, you've got to be planning in the now, like it's 2025, not like we're back in, I don't even know, 2018. And the other problem I see is that most strategic planning treats vision and operations as if they are separate things. You could spend weeks with a consultant talking about your North Star and your strategic pillars. And believe me, those are super important. Of course, I'm going to cover those with my clients. But if you're not connecting them with daily decisions that you're making, then what's the point of your North Star? Strategy isn't something that you do once every few years. Get away from the office, maybe have kind of a staff development day. Yes, that is all well and good. But strategy and that planning is about how you are going to make decisions every single day, especially when things get difficult. When a new opportunity comes up, how do you decide whether to pursue it? When your program manager wants to expand services, what criteria do you use to evaluate that request? Or if a funder asks you to modify your approach, how do you know what's negotiable and what isn't? These are all strategic decisions. And if your strategic plan doesn't help you make them faster and with more confidence, then it's not strategic. It's just an expensive document. So here's how I approach strategic planning differently. Instead of starting with where you want to be in 5 years, I start with where you are right now and what's not working. What decisions are you avoiding because you don't have that clear criteria? Which programs are you continuing because you always have, not because they're still the best use of resources? And which opportunities are you missing because you're too busy managing what you already have and possibly not delegating? These questions are going to tell us what needs to change first. And until these foundational issues are addressed, any long-term plan is going to be built on shaky ground. And I know that some board members don't want to hear this, but it is the truth, and so it needs to be talked about. I also focus on building decision-making frameworks instead of just some willy-nilly action plan. And believe me, I love myself an action plan, but you really have to approach this as a business because it is one. And so you need these decision-making frameworks. So for example, instead of mapping out which programs you'll launch in year 3, we create criteria for evaluating new program opportunities. And let me back up here because I have clients who are so heart-centered, want to help everyone. And so they see an opportunity and they want to jump on it right away. And they want to put money toward it, even if they're not sure if they can get the funding or if they can move funding around. And so I always tell them, hey, slow down, back up. Let's go back and let's analyze. Can you do this? Does this make sense? So you look at, does this new opportunity or program align with your core mission? Do you have the capacity to do it well? And will this strengthen or distract from existing programs and work? Because once you have this clear criteria that you go to each time, you can evaluate opportunities as they come up instead of either being paralyzed, right, by the analysis of it and overthinking it when somebody suggests something new. And the same goes for funding decisions. Instead of predicting where your money will come from, we develop criteria for which funding sources align with your values and which ones will pull you away from your mission. And I talked about this in the last episode. If you are throwing spaghetti at the wall with your grant applications and the funding of saying, well, let's see who will give us money, that is not the way to approach it. What you want to do is go back to this criteria, looking at funding sources, who aligns, who can you make better relationships with? And this approach makes strategic planning feel less like we're just guessing and more like you're building tools that will help you lead more confidently. Another thing I do differently is I plan in shorter cycles with built-in review points. Instead of a 5-year plan, we might do 6 to 12 months. I can maybe go 18 months if you and I are doing a monthly mentorship with, some big check-ins, because this keeps the planning relevant and it allows you to adjust as conditions change. And I see conditions change weekly. And I've also seen too many nonprofits stick with these outdated plans because they invested so much money and time creating them. It doesn't matter if they don't work anymore. Shorter planning cycles give you permission to pivot when you need to, and I guarantee you will need to. The goal with planning isn't to predict the future. The goal is to build your capacity to respond to whatever shows up in the future. And this also makes strategic planning feel more manageable for leaders who are already stretched thin, and I know that you are. You're not committing to spending the next 3 years executing a plan that was created before you even knew what you know now. You're building frameworks that help you make better decisions, and then you're reviewing and adjusting regularly based on what you're learning. Another shift I make is involving the right people at the right level. Most strategic planning either happens in isolation with just the executive director, or it involves everyone. Every board member wants to be there. They want to make it a retreat, and it becomes unwieldy. It becomes too much. I've found that the sweet spot is involving key staff in identifying what's not working and what needs to change. You can involve board members in reviewing and approving a new framework, new strategy plan, but it's giving the executive director and founder clear authority to make decisions within this plan. This prevents strategic planning from becoming committee planning, where every decision requires multiple meetings and consensus. That is just too much. You don't have time for that, and it really does become a cluster. I've seen it happen time and again. It prevents the executive director from feeling like he or she has to implement someone else's vision. You want your executive director, your staff involved in creating the plan so that they are more likely to use it. Because strategic planning should make your job easier, not harder. It should give you more confidence in your decisions, not more things to worry about. And it should help your team understand priorities, not create more confusion about what matters most in moving toward your vision. So if your current approach to strategic planning isn't doing these things, then I say it's time to try something different. And here's what you can do this week if you want to start planning more strategically. Pick one decision you've been avoiding and write down what would help you make this decision. Not the decision itself necessarily, but maybe some guidelines around what you need in order to make that decision. So for example, if you've been avoiding a conversation about whether to continue a particular program, what would you need to know to make that decision confidently? Would you need to know participation numbers, cost per participant? What about staff satisfaction and community feedback? These are criteria that set up your framework that give you the information you need to make that decision. And so then you can use this for similar decisions in the future. This is strategic thinking in practice. And I know a lot of people, when they hear strategy, strategic planning, they get overwhelmed. Like, oh, no, that's not how I think. That's not how I move. But as I've just showed you, it's just asking yourself some questions. And then when you have that information, then you can strategically make an informed decision. So how about doing this with a few decisions over the next month and start looking for patterns? Which criteria, which questions matter most to you? Which information are you finding that you need time and time again? And when you really sit with yourself and find the time, because I know there isn't a lot of it, which values are guiding your decision making? Because these patterns become the foundation for your strategic framework. It's not about a complicated document, a slide deck, something to present to your board. It's about a clear set of principles that guide how you lead. And we can do this together in my Boardroom to Bold Leader Intensive. We take 45 minutes, it's one-on-one, and we look at one area where you're feeling stuck, and then we flip it and create a short strategic framework questions that you can use to then move forward confidently. You don't have weeks to spend in planning mode. So when I work with you one-on-one, I want to identify that criteria that you need to start making better decisions, to delegate, and most importantly, to help you build your confidence so that you trust your decisions. You can find out more about Boardroom to Bold Leader in the show notes. Strategic planning isn't about predicting the future. It's about building your capacity to navigate whatever shows up in the future, because things are going to continuously show up and you need to be ready for them. All right, I will see you next time on The Rich Nonprofit.